Is the Sony FX6 still worth it in 2024? Well, that is what we are going to cover in today's video. And just for a little bit of a background, I bought this camera back in 2022, towards the end of it, and I've been using it professionally since then. If you guys are new here, my name is Judson. I run a successful production and creative agency that makes a little bit over $60,000 per month. And on this channel, I cover gear reviews, how to make money within the business, and also some self-help videos. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, go ahead and click that subscribe button and check out the channel below. So should you guys be looking to buy this camera in 2024? And in order to answer that question, we're gonna go over things like the specs, the specific use cases for this camera, the target audience or who this camera is for, some personal experiences and recommendations for the Sony FX6, and then the final conclusion to see if this camera is the right camera for you. So guys, let's start off with the specs of the Sony FX6. And before I get into the top 3 features that I personally absolutely love about this camera, let's just talk about the general selling points of the Sony FX6. So the first is going to be its full frame sensor. It's a 10.2 megapixel full frame Cosmos sensor, and yes, it has high sensitivity and very low noise. This camera shoots at 4K and it shoots up to 120 frames per second, which is more than enough if you guys are looking to get crispy slow motion footage. The next big feature is going to be the fact that this camera has variable ND filters. And guys, that's pretty much the main reason I bought this camera myself. Internal NDs are absolutely huge in the cinema world. And I can't tell you how much time this really does save you when it comes to swapping lenses, just making sure that you're at that steady shutter, and of course, not having to move up the aperture or ISO to change your exposure levels. The next big selling point for this camera is that it is very compact and lightweight. Now, guys, if you guys see it in my hand, this thing is really not that tiny. I guess it's pretty tiny in the cinema world if you're comparing this thing to like, you know, the Sony FX9 or the Sony Venice or things like the Red Komodos, Alexas. Obviously, this thing is going to be a lot tinier. But if you compare this to something like an FX3 or a Sony A7S3 or something in that line, it is going to be a lot bigger. But you would be surprised on how lightweight this camera actually is. The body itself really is not very heavy at all. But when you guys do add on things like lenses, microphones, the top handle, you know, an external screen like a Ninja, this thing can get pretty heavy. The next big plus is going to be the autofocus. So there's a lot of cinema cameras that don't actually offer autofocus. So of course that is a huge plus on this camera. The next big selling point is the fact that, and it does offer a dual XLR system. That means that you can actually record audio from 2 separate jacks at the same time, and of course be using professional microphones that do need to record via XLR. And on top of that, it also does offer phantom power, so there's a little plus as well. So moving into the ISO range, you have a native dual ISO that goes from 800 all the way up to 12,800. And then the final big feature is that this thing does shoot in S-Log3 and S-Cinetone. Now, you will not be able to shoot RAW directly out of this camera, but if you wanted to play around with ProRes RAW, you could do so by plugging this thing into an Atmos Ninja, and be able to do it that way. I personally don't feel like you really need to, because if you compare the file sizes and the way that you can play with the dynamic range and color grading aspect of this camera compared to something like the Sony A7S3, although they are both at 10-bit, you still are capturing a bit more information from the image, because this camera does capture more information. So when I upgraded to this camera, I definitely did see a difference in being able to, of course, color grade, you know, pull the highlights up or down, pull the shadows down and up. more so than my Sony A7S III. So yeah, those are really the main features of this camera. But what are the three main features that I think are the biggest selling points? Well, the first thing is definitely going to be the internal NDs. I upgraded from my Sony A7S III up to this FX3, so being able to get internal NDs is something huge for me. I've never owned a camera that had internal NDs. So that was definitely a huge selling point for me. And as I really only take out this Sony FX6 when I'm working on a little bit of a higher budget project rather than just kind of more run and gun smaller shoots, being able to have the flexibility of internal NDs has been a huge plus. The next big plus for me is that it does shoot 4K 120. I love the ability to shoot slow motion, especially in the cinema world. And the last huge plus, in my opinion, is of course the audio capabilities of allowing you to plug in microphones. I use this camera a lot for interviews, so that is another huge selling point on why I decided to purchase the camera. So guys, let's talk about the specific use cases of the Sony FX6. It's really well known in the documentary space because it is a little bit more lightweight and it does have those autofocus features, so people are able to kind of carry this around and just capture high quality content wherever they're taking it. Another big use case I see this camera is at sporting events. I see a lot of people whip out this Sony FX6 when I shot for NASCAR, when I shot for the Miami Open, and also some of the other sporting events that I go to. I see a lot of people carrying around the Sony FX6. So I don't personally shoot those type of things very often, but from the times that I was there, I did see a lot of people using that Sony FX6. And then another really good use case for this camera is going to be interview style videos. My company actually shoots a lot of corporate interview style videos where, someone's talking about their company, they're talking about all of their selling points and, their company and brand. And every single time I shoot a video like that, I always use the Sony FX6. Not only because of the great quality, but also because of the XLR jacks. So guys, who is the Sony FX6 camera for? It could be used on a wide spectrum. It could be used as an A cam for a videographer that is just kind of moved up the grounds and is looking for that next level cinema camera. It could be used as a B camera for somebody who already, shoots really, really high budget films and shoots on things like a Red Komodo or a Alexa Mini, or it could just be a straight up, main camera for a lot of videographers out there. And, one of the reasons that I went ahead and purchased this camera a couple years back is because I was mainly shooting on a Sony FX3 and the Sony A7S III. So I wanted to kind of level up and move up a notch in the cinema world. I was considering either buying this camera or the Red Komodo, but I decided to go ahead and stick with the Sony FX6 because all of my glass up to date is pretty much E-mount glass. I do own a couple Blackmagics and a few Sigma glass for that, but nothing crazy. So this just seemed like the best option at the time. Moving into my personal experiences and my recommendations with the camera. So guys, this thing has really been an absolute workhorse for me. As I mentioned earlier, because we do so many corporate shoots, it's allowed me to capture a higher notch of audio that I wasn't really able to capture with the Sony A7S III and FX6. The file sizes, of course, are a lot bigger. So when I was recording video, you will see that your memory cards do load up a lot quicker compared to the A7S III or the FX3. I'm not a huge nerd when it comes to the specifications on how they download, so I'm not exactly sure why that is. Maybe somebody can comment down below why the file sizes are so much bigger, but as I did mention, I do see a big difference in the color grading aspect of the dynamic range of pulling the highlights, lowering the shadows, all that good stuff. Because I've already been in the Sony ecosystem, it was a lot easier for me to just jump into the FX6 due to swapping out all of the lenses, due to the memory cards that Sony uses to shoot 4K 120, the CFast cards. And yeah, I've just been a big fan of Sony for the last 4 years as those have been my main cameras. So obviously we kind of went over all of the specs, all of the features some of my personal experiences with the cameras, who this camera might be for. And, you know, the question is, should you guys still buy one of these things in 2024? Here's the thing with videography and cameras in general. I think that we've hit a point where, of course, we can continuously see improvements in quality of video, but I don't think that, you know, new cameras that are going to be launched within the next 2, 3, 4 years are going to be significantly better or significantly different than the quality of videos that we're already shooting. And on top of that, guys, 80 to 90% of the things that we shoot, video is going to be compressed. To not buy a camera because you want to wait for an upgraded version, or you know, you want a better image quality, in my opinion, it really isn't the right way to think about these cameras. At the end of the day, these are just tools that allow us to get our work done on a daily basis, and of course be as creative as possible. And I truly do believe that the Sony FX6 has a very good workflow and does what it needs to do on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, for me, even if I saw a new camera come out, for me personally, it wouldn't make sense for me to upgrade at this moment, as all of the gear, all of the lenses that I have right now allow me to do my job. And that's when, for me as a videographer and also as a business owner, when making decisions on buying an expensive asset like this, that's the first thing I think of, is this going to produce me more money? Is this going to make me a much better image, or allow me to proceed with creating this video in a better way? And if the product answers yes to both of those questions, I go ahead and I proceed with purchasing it. And if it says no, or it's maybe just a little bit and there's only a little bit of value and benefit that I get from those products, then I would probably just still say no. So guys, that's pretty much my take on the Sony FX6. Is it still worth it in 2024? I would say absolutely still worth it. There are a lot of other cameras on the market for around that price point that you can go around and look at and shop at, but I think it really comes down to, what are you going to use the camera for? Do you need autofocus? Do you need 4K 120? Do you want to have the internal NDs? Are you okay with taking something a little bit bigger, although it's still pretty tiny, but something a little bit bigger than a Sony FX3 or a Sony A7S3? That comes down to you. And if you guys are ready to drop the money on that next level, entry level to cinema. And yeah, that's pretty much what I did for myself. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like down below. And I'm curious, guys, leave a comment down below if you own an FX6 or if you think the Sony FX6 is still worth it in 2024. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.